Welcome to the Indomitable podcast. I'm your host, Di Cerullo, and today we have another great episode that will leave you inspired. My guest today is the indomitable Dani James. For over 5 years now, Dani has been an American living in Sweden, where she has been a misfit that wanders. I love the term misfit. She is also studying at the University of Sweden. She is an influencer, an author who's working on a new book, and a sustainable travel expert. Hello, Dani. I am so excited to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Di.
Absolutely. So, if you wouldn't mind, just fill in the gaps. What else have I left out?
Geez, I'm also a speaker and an influencer on Instagram. I have also written a children's picture book, The Lost Little Dragon.
Love that. I'm so proud of you. First of all, I'm just going to take us off track for 2 seconds because I write adult nonfiction, right? So my son, who's 8, he will regularly be like, "Are you going to write a children's book? Because your book is not in our library." And I'm like, So I can't even impress my children. So I am impressed with you. Congratulations on a children's book. That is not easy work. So where did you move from?
I was in South Dakota.
Okay.
Pretty much outside of Sioux Falls. So in the Midwest, definitely different than a lot of other places in the States.
It seems like there's a huge story between, growing up in South Dakota and now living in Sweden and being an influencer and being an awesome person that wanders around Sweden. Like what's in the middle of that sandwich?
So I pretty much grew up going on a lot of road trips because I have family all over the States. And probably because I always traveled and saw all different kinds of culture, different ways of life and all these things. And so I had a broader perspective on life. And I think that was a little scary for me being in the Midwest as a little kid. The other kids kind of look at me strangely. And that's why I named my website Misfit Wanders, because I've always been a misfit and now I accept it. And I would rather help the other misfits find a way to travel as well. So I've been living in Sweden for 5 years now. And before that, I used to be a hitchhiker for a year on the West Coast.
Wow.
I used to be a weed farmer for 5 years. I had a traumatic brain injury accident. Those are like the big points.
So I'm going to pause you since you've got so much here. Let's break down the chapters here. So you are hitchhiking in California. How? Why? What was that experience like?
So it was the whole West Coast for a year. And I had not a very good experience with my sister. I went on a road trip and we've kind of always butt heads here and there. And I just couldn't take it anymore. And I'm like, I'm getting out. I'm walking. And so my dog, myself, and then my guy friend came with. And so we just started hitchhiking. I really like going out of my comfort zone. And that was a great way. Plus, you got to experience the world in a different light. And so many people, when you think of hitchhiking, so many people just see the bad of it. However, there's so much good in it. And if you look at it with positivity, you find so much more. Like I met some of the greatest people that would come pick me up. And then when I was hitchhiking with me and just my dog, so many women would just stop and pick me up. And the first thing that would come out of their mouth is, "I was scared for you." And I'm like, "Ah, thank you."
Too. If I was just by myself and I didn't have my kids, that would be, that would be how I go, honestly. I would just pick up, if you had a dog, I'd be 100%, I'd be pulling over.
Yeah. And then I also met so many people that you could totally tell if they were animal lovers because they would always stop and pick me up and they'd be like, "Oh, it was your dog." And then of course they'd buy him food or something for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be honest with you. I did not get great speeches about how to be safe in the world, but that was one I got. That was a serious one. That was, you don't hitchhike, but that's how you end up on Dateline, So what was it that do you think that empowered you to make that choice and sort of take that risk, but an enjoyable risk, but what empowered you to do that?
I think it's because I have all kinds of friends and I had some friends that were already hitchhikers and just hearing about their experience about it, I didn't feel scared. Since I was little, I've always been able to follow my gut feeling. So my intuition definitely helped me so much in life. So when a car would pull over to pick me up, I would have to analyze the whole situation and look in the person's vehicle and then within 10 seconds judge this person. Because, you don't want to just go into anyone's car.
Right. I'm thinking of 4 Dateline episodes that specifically took place with hitchhikers on the West Coast. And I'm like, geez, ma'am, like what? That's incredible. Tell me what the things were that you would look for that made you feel more safe.
I think it was, I didn't want to see any needles, beer bottles,
Valid.
like all those things that are kind of obvious that they're pretty bad red signals right there. And
those are good red flags.
I guess those. Yeah, and I guess it's more of the feeling I get from the person too. So it's like I look in there and then I see how it makes me feel. And then that's what I kind of go on, because there was this one guy that came and wanted to pick me up, and it was really hot that day. So my guy friend and my dog were underneath this tree in the shade. And so he probably didn't see them. And so he pulls over and I'm like, oh, can my dog and my guy friend come with? And the guy says, oh, no. And I look in his back seat and he has like 2 or 3 pillows and that's it. Yeah. So I'm like, oh, okay. No, thank you. And then he got so upset at me.
Yes.
And so I was like, okay, definitely no, thank you.
Yeah. Right? Do you ever notice that when like people expect you to act a certain way and they expect it to be gratitude, they have like really strong feelings when you don't match energy with what they were expecting? You know what I mean? And I've always found you're absolutely right. First of all, it's a huge red flag. And it's so funny that you bring it up as part of like you're keeping yourself alive while hitchhiking. Of course, that's one. That's like, I'm an abuser, point one. If can't have that boundary and have people just be like, cool, no worries. You know, what are some of the things that you would advise to somebody who is going to do this same intentionally crazy thing that you did?
Yeah, if this was around the time frame when I did it, then I would definitely suggest you got to stay positive. When situations feel crazy, you have to analyze it and think calmly about the whole situation. For instance, I was in another situation. We had a guy that drove us and we were in a pickup truck, which we were in the back of the truck, and it was a locked, they had to lock it to close it. So it's like we were locked back there. The guy pulls over, jumps out of the truck, runs into the forest, and my friend and I and our dog and my dog is just sitting there like, what just happened? I'm like, okay, calm down. We'll just give this a couple minutes and then we'll just figure out how to get out of here. And then like in a couple minutes, he came back, jumped back in the truck and just started driving. So I guess he must have had a pee. He just didn't say anything to us. It's like, what?
Wild. I'm not a good candidate for this lifestyle, but like I'm completely impressed because it's just so far outside what I feel like I would be capable of. That's completely amazing. So talk to me about, so you were in a pileup. How did that happen?
The car accident, that happened on my way to California from South Dakota. Okay. So I was in Wyoming in my small pickup truck with my dog, and there was black ice on the highway. And I'm thinking, oh, they wouldn't have this open if it's too dangerous. Oh, no. Of course, that's not the case. So the visibility was less than a mile. And all I remember is seeing all these cars in a big pile blocking the 2 lanes. And I guess I went on autopilot and tried to go around, or I don't know, avoid it somehow, but there's no hitting the brakes on black ice. So my truck ended up clipping to it, and then I spun into a 360. And in that same time frame, my small truck turned into a convertible. So the whole top was taken off, which also got me and gave me a huge gash on my head. Oh my God. Then the back of my truck was also hit because I was spinning. So the sheriff that had found me said that was the worst accident he has ever seen his entire career. And he was going to be retiring within like a couple weeks after that. And luckily it was so cold that I didn't have to have a blood transfusion. So I'm really happy about that. Yes. I kept going in and out of consciousness. And I guess I was holding my head going, my head, and just blood's coming out. And my dog, thankfully, was okay.
Oh, thank God. Like, I was halfway between the thought. I was just like, "Please, God, tell me the dog is okay." Like,
Yeah.
see, I'm that type of person. So I'm glad I didn't have to ask. I appreciate you. Whew.
Yeah, he was my furry soulmate. So I mean,
Mm,
I'm so thankful that he was okay from all that.
I'm so
Anyways,
glad.
yeah, anyways, the sheriff, he had to get a helicopter to get me,
Yes.
and I was induced in a coma, and then they flew me to Salt Lake City, Utah, and then I
Mhm.
was in ICU for 10 days there. And then I found out that I had four, what was it? Four bruises or 2 or 4 bruises in my head, and then 2 to 4 concussions as well. And then later
Oh,
on, I found out that I had fractured my neck, and I was very close to becoming paralyzed for the rest of my life.
oh my
And
gosh.
of course, when I find this out, I am so thankful and full of gratitude that
Yes.
I wasn't that bad compared to
Mm,
how it could have been.
yes.
Yeah. And so through that whole process, I pretty much had to relearn how to walk and how to use my brain. I couldn't really walk in a dark room without falling over because my equilibrium was non existent.
Right.
And what I call they had to give me common sense tests. Like they put me in a kitchen and just make sure I don't burn myself with a hot
Right.
stove. Like put the mitts on my hands and
Mhm.
remember to turn off the stove or the oven and all these things that we don't really think of.
Right.
We just do automatically, and they just wanted to make
Right.
sure I could do that.
Right. Right.
And that was
Wow.
just some of the tests. So
Right. Right. So, what was that experience like from the inside? I mean, you're in a hospital, you're in a coma. How did
Mhm.
any of that, were you aware of any of that was happening around you, or were you just,
Yeah,
recovering?
yeah. So the first 3 days, I was still in a coma, so I
Mhm.
don't
Right.
remember anything.
Right.
And then I
Right.
finally came out, and I was like, "What? Where am I?" And I was like, just everything
Wow.
felt foggy.
Right.
And I felt like I was missing a huge part of me. And it
Yeah.
made me so frustrated because it's like I couldn't grasp who I really truly was.
Mhm. Right.
But on the flip side, it was a good thing because then I didn't have my ego, my personality, my attitude, those things in the
Mhm.
way to actually listen to my inner self, which
Right.
it seems crazy to hear that, but I mean, I was listening to my inside and it was saying to me, like, you can heal this, you can do this, you're not going to be like this for the rest of your life.
Right.
And so I
This is
listened to that. And when
Mhm.
I listened to that, I told the doctor profusely that I didn't want medication because I wanted to feel what my body could do because I at least remembered I'm one of those people where I overdo things, especially if I
Mm.
can't feel the pain and I know
Mhm.
in the long run I would have
So true.
destroyed my
Yes.
body. So,
Yes. Yes. Agree. I also don't take pain medication because I had parents who had drug issues. So I never,
mm,
and I always just kind of, and I'm not saying that I have not been through anything like a coma or car accident, or any of that stuff. But the only time I ever took pain medication in my life was giving birth to my son. So anyhow, I'm proud of you. That's incredible. And that's an incredible amount of self-awareness and humanness. So yes. So you're recovering. Take us to that place. Where are we going next? You recovered with family?
um, so after 10 days, the doctor very much didn't want me to check out, but he finally let it happen because he
Mm,
wanted me to stay there and recover a bit more because he was scared
right.
and probably nervous for me. So
Right.
after that, I went with my parents back to South Dakota, and I think I
Okay.
stayed there for a month or two, did a lot of physical therapy and
Mhm.
mental therapy, just to make sure I was cognitive and all the things
Right.
with the brain.
Right.
And then I also had to do an eye test because I started seeing black silhouettes. So I would be looking, let's say I would be looking at a cow and then I would
Hmm.
move my vision to somewhere else. But then I would see the shadow, a silhouette of that cow at the new place I
Negative.
was
Yeah.
looking. And
Hmm.
it's just really strange. And I talked to the doctor about that, and she's like, oh, it's okay. Everyone heals differently. She's like, I had someone that only saw green for a while. And I'm like, what? So that
Aren't
was
they so
a bit interesting.
reassuring? Like, don't they just make you feel just, you're going to be fine. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that little bit. That's fine. Oh my goodness. At least
Mm.
like you knew what you wanted and where you wanted to go. What made you leave the hospital against medical advice?
Because I had this huge urge that I had to get to California to work. And that, because I remembered, at least I remembered that. And oh, yes, I also kept saying river, river. And my parents finally figured out that I wasn't meaning an actual river. It was a nickname for a friend. And I was actually supposed to pick him up from the airport in San Francisco.
Oh my goodness.
So, yeah, so he got to find out all this. Nowadays, he's my husband, but then he was just a friend.
So you left him at the airport, but now you're married, so it's okay. So no worries. Now you're married, it's fine. That's so scary. I'm so sorry that happened. I think the lesson here, as it always is, for anybody that's listening, is that you never want to leave your safety in the hands of someone else, right? Like you never want to assume that somebody else checked it, that somebody else made sure it was safe, because that's how you end up in scary safety situations, like, you know, the road not being closed off, even though it was black ice, since there was already a 7-car pileup. I think that a lot of times humans will be like, oh, this must be safe if nobody else has made it unsafe. And for me, it's the opposite. I'm like, it is unsafe until it is proven that other people have made it safe.
Yeah, it was actually
Always what's the craziest thing someone else is going to do to kill me today? And then just plan for that occasion.
Yeah, it was actually the day before I stayed in a hotel because I was like, oh, this is pretty bad. And so the next day at like 10, I left the hotel and I was like, okay, it seems a bit better. And then I drove for a couple hours, and then it was that accident that I ran into. It was just like, so I mean, I tried.
Yeah, no. I'm not blaming you. I'm saying many times I have had that conversation with people where I'm just like, no, we're not going to do that, because that's not how we stay safe. We don't stay safe by assuming other people have made it safe. That never works. Yeah. No, so I'm glad you had yourself, because it sounds like you had a really good head on your shoulders. So you went through the healing process, you went through the recovery process. I'm assuming that took a long time. How long did that take you to start feeling more yourself?
I think, well, it took about 2 years before I felt like me again. And then for me to heal, that took about 7 or so years. And I think it's been a year or so now that I actually feel practically fully healed. And it was, the doctor said, I think 5 to 7 years is probably the most healed I would become, or as much as I could heal. And so I kind of proved him wrong, at me feeling more healed at 8 years or so. And now it's been 9.5 years to this day.
Well, I am so glad that you have gotten to this place. So you are healing in Sweden, right? What makes you move to Sweden? What takes place in the interim there?
So that man that I mentioned, he's a Swede.
Oh, okay. All right.
So he kind of did this nice trick and showed me Sweden during midsummer and the month of June, which is the best time to come here. And I fell in love with the place.
Of course.
So then we moved here, and then I got to experience the first winter, which is the exact opposite, where there's barely any sun and it's super cold and icy and dark.
Yes. I'll be honest, I was living in Atlanta for 10 years and it was constant sun, like 9 months of sun. And then, of course, Jay, my partner, is a polar bear. So, like, he could never exist there. And he was like, come on, it's Massachusetts. It's so nice. We're best summer in the world, all that stuff. And, like, the summer is exactly, like, 2 minutes long, and like the rest of it is just snow. Like, it gets dark right now at like 4 p.m. So like, I understand deep in my heart, I understand the darkness. The darkness is long and cold. So you're adjusting to that. Great. What do you love about it? What's different there? What's better there? You grew up in South Dakota. How different is Sweden?
There's nature everywhere. Oh, there's nature everywhere. They have
Wow.
forests everywhere. I mean, our backyard is forests here,
Oh
and
my God.
the water is clean. You can drink the water pretty much anywhere in Sweden.
Wow.
And
Wow.
the Swedes, they love the nature. They are always doing stuff. They have this quote that there's never bad weather, only bad clothing. I think that's funny.
I feel like Jay feels similarly about cold weather. So, yep. I get why. I get
Yeah.
why.
And then
Beautiful.
they're really great at recycling here because it's really strange to me. It's really cool that they do this, but I still can't
Mhm.
grasp why, like how. But
Mhm.
anyways, they buy trash from other countries and then they turn it to renewable resource here. So it's crazy.
It feels like the science behind that is something that could be shared globally, but I'm going to keep my opinions to myself. Good for them. That's so great. I love that for them. I would love to see that become a trend, become shared more widely, and become something everybody does, because
Mhm.
certainly we are in a place now where things are not great. So I would love to see us take after, the Swedes on sort of a lot of subjects. So what else? You're raising a child there. How different is that?
Ooh, they have paternity leave. So the mother and the
I knew
father
you were going
get
to say it, but I was like, just waiting, just giving my heart a second to, yep, okay, go ahead, yep, paternity leave, yep,
So
parent
yeah,
leave, yep.
they both get it, and I think it's like half a year combined of time. I think it's about half of that time is 75% paid, and then the other half is 40% paid or 35% paid. And something I really love is they have it where jobs have to give you days for your child if they're sick. So it's like, if you have a sick kid, then you can tell your
Yes.
job, oh, hey, my kid's sick. I'm sorry, I got to stay at home. Because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, who's going to watch your kid if they're sick and you have to go to work?
If you're listening, she said, obviously, who's going to watch your kid if you got to work? Literally, like the amount of times I've had that discussion with people, and and my life is like so much better because I consult, I can make my own hours, I can do all of that stuff.
Mm.
But when I was pregnant with my first, I remember having the discussion with HR, and she was telling me, oh, no, you can't take any vacation days or any days off because you have to use your 2 weeks of vacation on top of, the 4 weeks that you get for having a baby. And I just remember thinking, oh, yeah, that's plenty of time. Like when I'm pregnant, I'm thinking, oh, yeah, totally. Okay. Y'all must know what you're talking about. And then I had my now 8-year-old, and I was like, he doesn't even sleep through the night at 6 weeks. He doesn't, like, he's not eating all, like, I'm not sleeping. He's not eating, like, I'm not even healed yet. The idea that I was just going to go running back into the world and just it's stunning to me. What do you think that those types of policies, how have they impacted the parents over there? How have they impacted people's emotional well-being? How has it impacted the culture of parenthood there?
I mean, Sweden is known as one of the best countries for
Yes,
families. And that's
literally.
because families, you can see kids go pretty much everywhere, anywhere with their family, and it's no big deal. I mean, you might see kids running around crazy in the grocery store
Mm-hmm.
and like bumps into someone's suitcase or something, and the guy will just pick up his
Yeah,
suitcase or briefcase or whatever it
yeah,
is so the kid can
whatever.
run underneath. It's no big deal.
Right,
Um, and
right.
another thing is that they love kids here
Yeah,
because it's so part of their
yeah.
culture. Oh, and something when I first moved here, I was so blown away by this. I saw men pushing strollers. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. I
And
don't see
men
that a
wearing
lot.
pink, yeah, and men wearing pink shirts, no big deal. And all of this just stuff that being from the US, I just wasn't used to. I mean, nowadays
Right.
it's a lot better.
Yeah.
However, when I first came here, I was love the
Sorry.
eye roll.
My eyes are in business for themselves. I apologize. Please continue.
But yeah. Yeah. Oh, and then something else they do here that is crazy. It's pretty common for Swedes, and I think also in Norway, for them to leave their kids out in their strollers to sleep in the winter.
Right.
And it's just
Right.
like you might be having a fika, which is like a coffee break. So you're at a coffee shop with some friends or something, and then you just leave your kid outside in the stroller when it's winter.
Right.
No big deal.
Right. That's crazy talk to me. Like, so when I had my first child, I had to decide that I wasn't going back to my job, obviously, because you get 6 weeks of maternity leave and it just wasn't enough. And I had to like resign. I was like, look, I wanted to do this. I wanted to come back into life, but that's not going to be possible. I just had this baby, obviously. Right. But not only just that, places weren't designed to bring your baby. People looked down on you if you brought your baby to any of these places. People had comment like my son was colicky, like he would cry all the time, and it just trapped me in this space of like loneliness where I was constantly apologizing for existing within the boundaries of adulthood, right? Like I was constantly like, he was crying and I was overwhelmed and exhausted and I'd be apologizing to people, and like it sounds to me like so many other places in the world make it a community goal to help raise the children in their community. And I was reading an article the other day. A father had taken his daughters to Greece, and the people on the buses with him would just like get up to help, him sit with his children, or one grandmother type person would hold on to his child while they were on the bus to keep her safe, even though he didn't speak Greek and they didn't speak English, and they just all like helped. And here in the US, it is absolutely the opposite of that. And not everywhere. Like if you make community as a parent and you work hard at that, you can sometimes, get a little bit better, and you can have like mom friends and that sort of thing, but you don't have a whole community that is helping you raise this kid. In fact, largely the reason I only have two, and I definitely am not going for a third, is because when we had the pandemic, people felt very clearly that this had been a choice that I made. And thus, anything that happened within the bounds of that choice was my own problem to deal with. Like, we couldn't get them vaccinated for a certain amount of time. So, of course, we were trapped in our houses for over 2 years. And people were just like, that's your problem. Shouldn't have had kids. And you're like, wait a minute. I thought this was important for everyone that parents have children. So we're having less and less babies as humans, and each country is dealing with it differently, right? Like, so each country is either putting more money into children and into parenting and offering more services as a community. And then you have some places where it's just like, nope, you know what we're going to do to change this? We're going to make it harder. We're going to make people have babies that they can't take care of. We're going to do these, you know what I mean? It seems like the respect that each country feels for the institution of parenthood influences their laws and customs around it. And it sounds like Sweden, before I get off on a different tangent, it sounds like Sweden cares very much about the parents and supporting the family unit. Are you living in sort of a dual consciousness with like seeing how it's going for, the US while you're in Sweden?
I mean, I'm always going to be an American. That's always going to be me. But nowadays, I don't really look into what's happening in the US because it's always bad news. It's always bad stuff. And it just gives me so much pain. And it's like, I maybe will hear something from some friends or family that are there. And I always like, oh, about all the gun shootings. It breaks my heart to have to, like, for the people I care about, they have to worry about that, about their kids. And it's like,
oh my God. Yes.
That's something that is so out of the bounds here. The guns here, the gun laws that they have here is you have to pass a psychological test, a forest test, a forest and animal test, and then you need to know how to shoot a gun. So it's like they want to make sure that you know the places you're going to be shooting at to make sure in the right place, because you're supposed to be hunting. So they only can get hunting license, and they only can get pretty much shotgun or the hunting guns.
Yes.
So I mean, to think of it breaks my heart to think of that. That's a huge reason I'm very thankful to be here. And a huge reason that we decided to move to Sweden was we were thinking about maybe having a family. And so I read into a bunch of the stuff about Sweden when it came to family. And I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, when you have a child here in Sweden, it's common to have it in the hospital by midwives not a doctor, because they want to have it as natural as possible. They don't want to make it like how you need to have a bunch of medication and all this stuff if you don't want. It's like what I was given was laughing gas. And that's all I wanted. I didn't want anything else. And that it was very difficult for me. It's like 24-hour plus labors.
Yes. My first was 20. My first was 20 hours. And I remember I did get medicine for him. And then my daughter, 2.5 years later, she was so fast. She wanted to come out so fast that she was just like, from the time that my water broke to the time that I was delivering her was like 35 minutes. So like he was 20 hours. And like I thought I had time to get to the hospital and all that stuff. Thank God it was right down the street, because she was exiting. She was like, she had her own opinion about how this was going to go. So yes.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, definitely. I get the 24 hours thing. Woo. I thought it was going to be the same for both kids.
Yeah, every kid is different, that's for sure.
I mean, every kid's different, but not only every kid's different, even your own kids are different. I have sort of different feelings about how I raise my kids based on how I was raised. Like, my kids are both neurodivergent, so we're dealing with like ADHD, but I'm clearly very ADHD, so it doesn't really bother me. Like, I just plan for it, right? Like, I just plan for the chaos and the needing to be outdoors and the needing to like run around more. But they definitely feel confident asking questions of adults. I am super fine with that, and people don't always like that. So why are you raising your child, let's say, wild
free?
Child style? Right. Why are you raising your child free? Like, and what attitudes are you receiving as a result of that? Is it the same as me or totally different?
It's received a lot differently here because of the culture and everything. So my husband, he has ADHD, and then I have ADHD. So it's kind of a given that our kid's going to probably have it. And his energy is like here almost all the time. So it's like I really have to plan activities regularly. If I don't have activities planned, then we definitely need to go outside and do some things. And he doesn't like the winters. So gets a little crazy for me, because I'm like, oh, I gotta plan something. I gotta do something. Like I gotta be active and stuff. And so, I mean, yeah, it's a bit more work, but I mean, I know that this is going to help them in the long run. And if a kid can be free to be a kid and to ask questions and do all these things, it helps boost up their confidence, especially when they get older, because right now they're in the developing stages to learn their personality and all of these things. And I want him to be able to stand his ground and be able to ask questions and not be afraid to be him.
Right. Absolutely. And while we're here, friends that are listening, do you know what the thing that makes your kid safer actually is when it comes to not being victimized by predators? It has to do with them being able to stand up to adults. It has to do with them being able to say no to adults, having the ability to stand up for themselves, advocate for themselves, especially to adults and authority figures. So if you are teaching, as much as I get negative feedback about my children asking questions and pushing back, the reason I'm doing that is because it keeps them safer in the long run. It makes them more safe. And I'm not saying that, this is the only thing. It's one of a series of things. But definitely, if you want your kid to be safer, make sure that they have the language to self-advocate and push back against authority figures, especially in those circumstances. So just with my, foster care experience, that's something I can definitely tell you.
It's really good in a family like the mother and the father and the kid or the kids have it where they don't have secrets. Because when it comes to sexual harassers, it's usually someone in the family.
It's usually someone in the family.
Yeah, or someone close, like a close friend or something. So it's really good to tell your kids, like, we don't have secrets in this home. Like, if you can't hide anything from me, tell me, because, if some situation happened, that other person's probably telling them, oh, you have to be quiet. It's our little secret.
You have to be quiet about it. You're going to get in trouble too. Yeah, absolutely. I'll watch stuff on the TV with my kids, and I will just be talking to them through it, where I'm just like, oh, Wouldn't it have been better if they all just sort of told each other the truth like we do? Wouldn't it have been better if like they didn't have to like sneak around? My son's like 8 and he's just like, I do not want to waste energy on that. It's like, oh, thank God I found that one thing that's going to like get those messages in, because with ADHD, you're just planting seeds constantly. And sometimes they're picking them up and sometimes it's just, anyway. So your new book, tell me about your new book.
So I talk about my traumatic brain injury and how I overcame it. And then you get to learn more about my story on the weed farm, along with the hitchhiking. And
the weed farm. How did I forget the weed farm in the middle of this? So fun. No. Got to leave something for you to buy the book, friends. That's why I forgot the weed farm, because we wanted to make sure you bought the book. Okay, keep going.
But yeah, so the book is pretty much about me overcoming that. And the reason I'm writing this book is I want to inspire people to overcome obstacles in their life and get to where they want to. Yes. And I mean, another thing about this book is I want people to realize how impactful nature is. Thus, I became a sustainable travel expert.
Yeah, absolutely. It changed your life. I love that. Mm-hmm. The most important thing about writing books like that, you don't even know who it's for yet, right? Like you write it like it's for you and you don't even know who's going to read it. But later down the road, more and more people come to you and they're like, this book. And that is why I do this, because I wanted more and more people to be able to see themselves in others that had gone through what they are going through ahead of them on the path. So I think it's so meaningful that you're writing a story about how you healed, how you overcame, what sorts of things helped you with that, because my story is not always going to like resonate with other people. Everybody needs to be telling their own story so that everybody can see themselves in the story. So I love that for you. And I love that for the world, honestly, especially considering your broad view on what it is to be a human. Like, that's awesome. I love that. People who travel have the best understanding of what it is to be human. And I think that that is completely awesome. And I can't wait to read your book. So I'm very excited to have met you. Woo! I would love for this to go on forever, but as I'm always saying, we need to let Dani get back to her very important life, and she's in Sweden, so this is our, like, poor thing. It's the dark where she is right now, because it's starting to get to be dark here. So if people want to follow your work, how do they do that best?
Yeah, so people can find me on my travel blog, misfitwanders.com. They can find me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn. I think that's about it. And all Misfit Wanders. So
perfect. And I will have all of those links in the show notes. So if you'd like to connect with Dani or follow her work, that will all be below in the show notes. So y'all, thank you for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the Indomitable podcast for more incredible stories of humaning. Remember, my new book, Indomitable, a foster care story, is available wherever you get your books. Thank you to all of my Indomitable friends who came out to visit me at my book signing last week. It is always so rewarding to see people being impacted by my story and sharing their journeys. If you have an upcoming event you'd like me to bring the Indomitable experience to, please submit a request via my website at daicerullo.com. And finally, as ever, I am so happy to have you here in community with me. And remember, together we are truly indomitable. Have a great week, everybody. Take care.